Hi, my name is Ron Truan. I'm the Vice President for Research at Kansas State University. Tom Thornton, President and CEO of the Kansas Bioscience Authority, is here with me today. Scott Russ, Director of Pat Roberts Hall. Mayor Bruce Sneed here in the room. And on the phone we have Jamie Johnson. Jamie, are you on?
I am. Yes, I am.
Thank you. He's the Director of the National Labs for Department of Homeland Security. What we would like to do today is basically do a follow-up. We understand there was a news conference just recently about the NRC report that just came out and about NBAF. And clearly NBAF is a critical national priority, something we've been working on here since early in 2006. Part of the reason that we went forward with this effort was because of the livestock industry in this area. We believe this is a critical investment so we can protect livestock and the ag economy, and that's an overall goal of this whole process. Along the way here, as part of the design process, the site-specific selection review was done and assessment review, and that is the thing that the NRC has been commenting on. And what I would like to do before bringing Tom on is have Jamie Johnson with the Department of Homeland Security make a few comments about that particular process. Jamie.
Yeah, thank you, Ron and Tom. And thank you for having me. And we at Homeland Security are pleased with the process to date. Obviously, this has been a very long and involved process, starting with the mission need, which, as Ron has said, the mission need for this facility is greater than ever. I mean, the country needs to have a modern biocontainment lab to study these infectious diseases, the replacement for Plum Island, and to handle the emerging diseases that are coming down the pike. The site selection is well past us. We are in the design phase, and we're looking forward to continuing the site-specific design going forward. The risk assessment that was recently completed by DHS and then analyzed by the National Academy, which we'll talk later, has been completed, and we view that as a very critical step in identifying necessary mitigation strategies for design enhancements, operations protocols, and surveillance techniques that will be implemented over the next 8 years. So we are well into the process. We are looking forward to moving to the next stage of the design.
Tom.
Tom Thornton, I'm the President and CEO of the Kansas Bioscience Authority. I'll hit a few points and then we'll open up to questions. Jamie and Ron both mentioned the critical national need. The most imminent threat to our nation's homeland security is a biological attack perpetrated against a subway or an agriculture target. The National Bio-Agro-Defense Facility is a key federal investment to fill that gap, to better prepare our country for that threat. Our nation gets a failing grade for our ability to recognize, respond to, and recover from a biological attack. And again, the NBAF is a key part of that. The site-specific risk assessment was called for by Congress under the FY 2010 Appropriations Act, Homeland Security Appropriations Act. Was also called for that the National Academy of Sciences evaluate this risk assessment. A risk assessment is intended to inform future design, intended to inform future operations. It's being done at a 35% design phase. So much of the work, the findings that the department has put together, and of course the findings of the Research Council will be incorporated into future design, will be incorporated into the operations of the facility again approximately 8 years from now. But a risk assessment, to be clear, is all about identifying the risks and developing mitigation strategies. And this is really a key point. A risk assessment doesn't sit on a shelf. A risk assessment is an iterative living document. And the Department of Homeland Security, as Jamie can get into, intends to incorporate its own findings and recommendations into its risk assessment, and of course those from the Academy as well. We believe this will make the NBAF a safe and secure facility. It will allow it to achieve that very important mission of addressing threats, very real threats to American agriculture. With that, we will take questions.
This is Brian Thompson with Kansas Public Radio. in reading the printed response from K-State to the report from the National Research Council, you seem to be criticizing the methodology, and it might look self-serving for the place where there's an economic interest in having this research facility go forward, to be criticizing the methodology of basically the National Academy of Sciences. How do you respond to that?
Let me start. This is Ron Truin. A couple of things. That there were some parameters applied to this particular study that from all we can garner would have never been applied to this sort of biocontainment enterprise before. So no other facility has ever had a cumulative risk assessment, which is used in NASA, nuclear industry and whatnot, applied to it. So to apply parameters that have never been used before and at least imply a very high level of likelihood that there will be a release from the facility just seems to be inappropriate. And again, as Tom and Jamie have pointed out, part of the process here is to put mitigation strategies in the design of the facility, in the operations of the facility. All these types of facilities have lots of redundancies in the physical structure, the operating procedures and whatnot, and we have experts here who can speak to that. But this approach had never been done before, and it's our understanding that the Academy's committee basically couldn't cite another example where this type of methodology was applied to a biocontainment operation like the CDC in Atlanta or any other.
If I may follow up, the report says that there's a 70% chance of a release over the 50-year lifetime of the facility. So what you seem to be saying is not that assessment is wrong, but that it's not a fair way to judge the risk.
This is Jamie Johnson. I think the 70% number is misleading. I think that's the point. It is not taken into account mitigation. So it takes your worst case scenarios unmitigated, all the things that, all the procedures and designs are not in place. I think it's important for people to realize that we're very early in the process. This is an iterative process, as we mentioned, but we're early in the design, early in the planning. We know what we need to mitigate. We know the plans and things we need to put in place, and we're going to go doing that. So the 70% is misleading because once you apply the mitigations, then it becomes a very low risk.
This is Sayed Shabir from Channel 49 in Topeka. We mentioned risk assessment, and that can be a little broad term. Can we pinpoint some specific things that we were looking at with this facility here, and then also the risk posing to those in close proximity, like the people of Manhattan? Are there any risks there, and how are those being handled?
The risk assessment, I think it's often used in different terms. This particular risk assessment was intended to be what we say identifying your operational risk. What are the scenarios that could go wrong? How do we mitigate them? How do we put in place procedures, state-of-the-art design, protective equipment, response strategies, both from an animal and human standpoint, to protect both the workers and the public? I think it's important to point out, too, this process has already begun in Manhattan, Kansas, with the Biosecurity Research Institute already having established a lot of those processes, in the state of Kansas having run multiple scenarios and planning scenarios and exercises. So we're clearly going to leverage that. And I think it's important to recognize that those mitigation strategies will be put in place.
Ron, this is Aaron Leiker at KMA in Manhattan. How are you doing?
Good.
A quick question. Obviously, for most part here in Manhattan, it's been a favorable response to NBAF, economic development being the number one. But there have been critics here locally. Do you expect, number one, this report to increase the opposition that is in the community? And beyond that, what would you, obviously you were trying to calm some fears at the beginning of this, but what do you say to those people that have been critical here in Manhattan to calm their fears now after this report comes out?
Right, but Ron, Tom, if I could be the first to answer that. I think from a Department of Homeland Security perspective, we will not build this lab if we can't be built safely and operated safely. I think it's important also to point out to the people of Manhattan that Congress has weighed in on this, and they have said, the Secretary of Agriculture will give us the permit to work on these particular select agents. And so we have to meet a whole series of stringent regulations and processes, including the building and operations of a safe facility, before we will even get the permit. So there is a process of due diligence in making sure the facility is going to be operated safely. We certainly will involve the stakeholders as we go forward. We enjoy an excellent working relationship with the City of Manhattan in making this a very open and transparent process going forward.
I would add, Tom Thornton here from the Kansas Bioscience Authority, I would add that, again, my point about a risk assessment being an iterative, ongoing, living document, to me this is a very important point, and that is to say that as better data become available, or for that matter, as better models become available and are accepted, and as standard operating procedures evolve and mature over time, they will be integrated into the risk assessment and the ultimate operations of the facility. To say that the risk assessment is a best and final document that we put on a shelf, again with the notion that the lab being operational many years from now, I think is a very different point. So this notion of a living iterative document, I think, is absolutely key, but more to the point, it's key to ensure the ultimate safety and security of the facility and the public.
And Ron True, I just want to follow on to that, going to the early point that this was an economic development issue. I don't think any of us here at Kansas State University looked at that as a driving force for this process. It was a matter of we have the expertise here at the institution, and proximity to animal health research was the #1 selection parameter utilized by Homeland Security. Part of the issue when you try to do science on an island, you don't have a core cluster of expertise to move things forward quickly. We have lots and lots of scientists here working on the key issues for diseases that exist in this country already. They can then partner with the Homeland Security, USDA, and other scientists that are working on this. This is about getting answers to protect the ag infrastructure in the most expeditious manner, the quickest you can do it. That's why this is the right location. Granted, there will be some economic impact on the upside from this, but that was not the driver. It was to locate the facility where the expertise already exists. That was really why we went forward with a lot of partners in the area, other regional universities, the animal health corridor companies, other entities that are in this part of the country to do this.
Eric Atkinson, News Media Services here at K-State. And in view of the NRC report, what does that do to the timetable for the NBAF project in general? What happens now, and how does that shift, if at all?
And Jamie, this should probably be yours, since this is a federal project. It's not a K-State or KBA project.
That's correct. Yeah, this is a Department of Homeland Security project, but obviously we're working very closely with KBA and K-State, and we have a very strong partnership with them. The timetable, it says that we continue to move forward unless we're directed otherwise by Congress. The 2010 Act that Tom Thornton read, that we were supposed to complete the site-specific risk assessment, submit it to Congress, and then proceed with the construction, which is the first phase, the central utility plant. So unless we're directed otherwise, we plan to stay the course, and the schedule has not changed. Again, going back to the iterative nature, we will continue to iterate in our design and risk assessments. At this point, we do not anticipate any impact on schedule.
I'll say from a literal timeline perspective, the submission of the NAS evaluation and the site-specific risk assessment, which will be done today, triggers a 30-day clock. At that point, the remaining $5 million in the FY 2010 appropriations bill can be released. Those will be the first funds for construction. There's $40 million in the President's budget request that would be reprogrammed or provided directly by Congress through appropriations for the initial construction of the central utility plant. And then, of course, in 2012, there's an expectation for larger amounts of funding for large-scale construction.
And Ron, again, if I can just throw on a tail-on statement here, that the site-specific risk assessment, Homeland Security had 130 scientists and experts, government employees, contractors, and whatnot working on this. and involving experts from USDA, CDC, all of the relevant agencies. They used international and domestic labs as a comparison, so they brought a lot of horsepower to bear. And so if you go back to the original selection that had the country's top infectious disease scientists doing the selection of Manhattan, all of those individuals again involved in the site-specific risk assessment, we really do believe that the right people have been brought into this mix, and that the right things are being done and will be done.
Hello, this is Tim Carpenter with the Capital Journal in Topeka, and I was wondering if somebody would discuss the political dimension of all this. There are critics in Congress of this project being placed in Kansas. How do you think this report will be used?
I can try to answer that first.
Who is speaking?
This is Jamie Johnson, Department of Homeland Security. I think it's important to recognize the site-specific risk assessment was not a site selection decision per se. We have made the site selection decision, based on all the capabilities that Kansas has and provides. This was, as we've said before, to help us identify the risk of operating and what we need to do to mitigate this risk, and both from a design and operational standpoint. I think from the other factor is, after talking to many people on the Hill, everyone is in strong agreement that there is a need for this facility. I think that is an emphasis that cannot be made enough to study the new and emerging diseases in livestock. So I think politically the support is there for this facility. We look at the SSRA as again, this is the next step in the design risk assessment process.
This is P.J. Greekspor with Kansas Farmer Magazine. I was a little taken aback at the part of the report that suggests that Mercy Regional Health Center has not the infectious disease clinicians or the capability to handle a sick worker from the laboratory. Is that is there not a knowledge that Mercy Medical is owned by Via Christi in Wichita, and that even driving the speed limit down the highway, you can have anybody from Wichita's health cluster there in an hour and a half?
Jamie, you could address maybe some of the elements in your risk assessment, but I will say this is probably a good example of the kinds of things that will be improved over time, regardless of what's in the risk assessment currently, or the National Research Council's evaluation. This is the sort of thing that over the next 8 years, I would think that DHS and this community and that institution in particular would address.
Well, absolutely, Tom. I think it's important to recognize, that is part of our mitigation strategy, to work with our stakeholders. We identify, there are needs to implement some of these mitigation strategies to beef up the capabilities. Much of it has already begun, and we've already begun our discussions with the state and local regional players there about what capabilities will be needed in terms of hospitals and response personnel. Again, many of that is already in place, so taking advantage of the University of Kansas down the road, or Fort Riley, or some of the local places, those are the things we're going to begin to pull together in the next 5 to 7 years as we begin to plan for our operational and emergency response plans.
And this is Ron Truon. I would just throw onto that certainly with the Biosecurity Research Institute, we have the folks here in the local community tied into our occupational health programs and all of those sorts of things. So the dialogue is ongoing. We're looking at a facility, NBAF, that on the current timeline will open and be fully operational in 8 years. I think a lot of things can be done between now and then to address whatever issues are out there. And again, this is very early in this process.
I should point out, the Academy, the report pointed out some of these things, and we didn't disagree, because we recognize these are things that we need to go forth and do. We have the time to do it, and we're still very early in the process.
Hi, this is Allie Van Dyke with the Kansas City Business Journal. I was just going to say, I know you guys don't agree with some of the items included in the council's report, but what are you guys going to do with the report going forward? How much of an obligation do you have to address the concerns that you don't agree with?
We have first let me say we respect the Academy's report. Obviously, they're a third-party reviewer. we will implement many of the things that they have found in the report. In fact, we were already on our way in implementing some of those things. There were a lot of positives that they identified in their report, such as affirming our models, such as saying we have done a very thorough job in our conclusions and our mitigation. So we will take those into account and some of the other suggestions going forward. Again, the point of disagreement is the overall risk and the cumulative risk. But as far as the rest of the report, we will take those into account going forward.
And this is Ron True, and I would just throw in on top of that many of the things that were pointed out are things that were in the queue to be done. They may not have been addressed in this specific SSRA, but all of these processes are part of opening and operating one of these facilities. You go through a long stepwise process, and in the end, to work with these select agents in the building, CDC and or USDA APHIS, or the combination of the two, have to approve the use. They have to validate that the building is operational, fully operational in all aspects, that the biosafety programs are in place, all the protocols are being followed. So these are very natural, ongoing activities, nothing new and out of the ordinary here.
This is John Madej with Drovers Magazine. My question is, it might be a little bit too early to really address this, but I wonder if anyone could address any specific changes, specific mitigations to address some of the risks mentioned in the report. If there are any strategies that you're looking at to reduce those risks, anything you can say specifically about about changes in the design or operating protocols.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there are several that we can look into. One was the use of respirators as a mitigation. That will be our baseline. Obviously, we can evaluate that as we get operational. But the implementation of respirators would be a good example. The other, as you may recall in the report, from a design standpoint, is the dual parallel HEPA filters. Now, it's a requirement to have a double HEPA and do the dual. Again, that was something we had already identified in our SSRA, our own risk assessment, and so we are going to go forward and continue to evaluate it and implement that. So, and there are numerous other examples as well.
Hey, Jamie, real quick, how many recommendations did you have for risk mitigation strategies in your risk assessment?
In the DHS risk assessment, there are 17 prioritized recommendations in our risk assessment, and we summarized a few of them already. And we accepted them all. I think I should point out when we're going forward to implement those. And again, we don't use the iterative process lightly. That is what it is. As technologies evolve, threats change, we learn more about pathogens, we can always rerun some of these scenarios. We don't intend to do the SSRA over. It served its purpose, and we will continue to iterate. But 17 recommendations we're implementing going forward.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Christine Metz with the Lawrence Journal World, and at the press conference earlier with the National Research Council, they had suggested that there just wasn't enough time for the DHS's report, especially in regards to the mitigation factors, and I didn't know if you guys would agree with that assessment or not.
This is Jamie Johnson, DHS. We actually do not agree with that. I think the issue is, and the Academy would agree, is a lack of data. I mean, the data out there for some of the emerging pathogens is not there. So if you give us another 2 years, we wouldn't have that data. That data does not exist. So we did the analysis with the data that we knew, and with also getting subject matter experts from around the world. We had a panel that helped us formulate some of these analysis and scenarios from other laboratories and other scientists who have expertise in working with these types of data. The other point is that we actually did work very closely with the state of Kansas and the local folks in getting some of the animal populations, animal data from them, from the public records and from the folks out in Kansas, and that was fully used in the report, and we had the appropriate amount of time to incorporate that.
And Christine, I might just throw in that, that as an example, the Livestock Commissioner provided data from the innumerable exercises that have been run in this state. Every county has a response plan in this arena, and yet it's our understanding that the Academy Committee actually questioned those results, saying they can't be real. Well, those have been exercised multiple times. We know that some of the models that are looked at in other states across the country come from Kansas. So that is an area, again, because of the production, especially in the western part of the state, that this is something we have been prepared for, are ready for, and the data is very sound.
Hi, this is Ed, the operator, and that was the last question in the queue. If you have any other local questions there, you might want to handle them.
Any more local?
If not, thank you for your interest.
Yep, much appreciated.
Thanks,
Ed. Thanks, Jamie.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.